Hello world. I feel like I hate this headset. I feel like I'm at a call center. Welcome
You
to the
you do
Olivie
look,
Blake Support Center.
yes, you look like you're gonna sell me some like internet tchotchkes, and I'll accept. I'll
If
have
you've
change.
been in an accident via one of reading one of these many books, please speak now. We'll send all claims your way. Is that a sword behind you? Sorry, just the tangent off.
Oh yes, this is my dagger. My husband gave
Nice.
it.
Excellent. Just gonna brandish away.
Yeah, it's it's actually made of this is the handle from one of his old baseball bats.
Oh, nice. That's cute.
Yeah, my love language is weaponry.
But like, you made it romantic at the same time. So now it's a balance. We're in this weird.
Mhm. Yes.
Nice. Right. Well, happy rebook birthday, I think it's fair to say,
Thank
because
you.
it came out and then it came out again.
Yes, it did.
How do you feel this time around? Because obviously it's the second time around and you've kind of gone through it once and you're going through it again.
Yeah. Oh, pretty terrified actually. I had to have a whole session with my therapist just kind of like figuring out a game plan. Because when it came out the first time, it was a totally different situation. I had queried Alone with You in the Ether under a different title, a much worse title. I don't know what's wrong. It was originally called Turn, in case there are any literary agents out there being like, that sounds familiar.
As in just the word turn.
Yeah, just the word turn. I don't know why.
Why
and
not?
then so I think, and my husband was like, you know that Alone with You in the Ether, because it comes from something that's in the book.
Yeah.
He was like, you know, that's a much better title. Like after I had already queried and failed a bunch of times.
He was just sat there one evening like, you should just change the title. You're like,
yeah. Actually, you know, like it's kind of a valid point though, because when I queried My Mechanical Romance, which is the book that ultimately got me my agent, a lot of people answered very quickly, and I think because the title was in the, you know, like it's yeah. I think there's such a thing as a grabby title or judging a book by the title.
Sure. Although I can only call that book My Chemical Romance, which is not the same thing. And I always just clash the two together. So I do apologize if I ever say My Chemical Romance to you. And here's what we're talking about.
It's fine. What I think is so funny is the people who think that like it's not intentional, that I might have somehow gone my whole life.
Everything you do is intentional at this point.
Well, I mean, come on. I've never heard My Chemical Romance. Like, that's crazy.
It's great.
Although people do think that I'm much younger than I am.
Wow.
Well, I'm totally getting off. I'm gonna come back to it. Don't worry. We're just going like this before. I just came back from FEEL, the literary festival in Guadalajara.
Yeah, that looks amazing.
Yeah. And there were quite a few people that came up to me and they were like, oh, like you're so young to have written a novel. And I was like, first of all, I've written many novels.
Yeah.
Second of all, I'm 33. And they were like, oh.
Well, for a lot of people, this is their first exposure to you.
Right.
Like, I saw someone was like, Atlas 6, her debut. And I was like, that's not her debut. Well,
I mean, yeah, it's crazy to think that it technically is. Like, it's the first book that came out traditionally published. So it's most people's introduction to me. And I don't, you know, I have no like grudging feelings about that. But, this is how we're going to come back around. So my 2020 was a crazy year, you know, for everyone. But for the moment, we'll focus primarily on me. So the Atlas 6, I self-published it January 2020. Yeah. Then, you know, the world shut down as I was concluding the My Mechanical Romance manuscript, and then had begun to query it. And then after I finished the manuscript, I had started revising Alone with You in the Ether, the book that was called Turn, that a bunch of agents had rejected. Well, not a bunch, like 3 people, maybe 2.
You want bigger numbers. We want like 10,
yeah.
15.
Well, I mean, I sent it to a lot of agents. I think 2 people requested the full manuscript, I think. And the feedback I was getting was like, you know, these aren't really likable characters, or these aren't relatable situations. And I was like, well, I wasn't really aiming for likable or relatable, so my bad. And so then I thought, you know, it's clearly it's gonna die on the query room floor. unless I do something with it myself. And I didn't think it is possible to have an excellent self-publishing career in a lot of different genres, contemporary romance or historical romance or fantasy. I think there are lots of authors who can genuinely make a living self-publishing, but Alone with You in the Ether is closer to literary. It's more like contemporary fiction. Yeah. So I kind of knew this wasn't a good self-publishing option. Like, this isn't something, it's not going to make, the long story is, it's not going to make any money. That's fine. It was worth it to kind of do whatever I want with it. I took the original manuscript was meant to be like truly literary, which is not something I think I have the capacity to be. So I decided, I was like, I'm just going to make this weirder. I'm going to make it feel more like me and lean into what I'm trying to do here, which is to explore mental illness from inside of the mental illness. And then I had signed with my agent at that point, and I told her, like, I have this manuscript. If it's cool with you, I'm going to self-publish it because I don't think there's like a future for it. Like, I don't think there's any other place for it except for the handful of people who just routinely buy my stuff.
Like the deep roots of Tumblr.
Yes, yeah, I self-published this book, exactly. I self-published this book for Tumblr. And she was like, are you sure you don't want to go on sub? Like, are you sure you don't want to try to get it traditionally published? Which is funny because I had originally sent it to her and she didn't want it at the time. It's fine. I love you, Amelia. Yeah, and I was like, no, I'm really not willing to compromise. I don't want to make changes. It is the way I want it to be, so I'm just going to self-publish it. And then, so putting it out the first time was very like, I had just no expectations. I had the sense that maybe a few people would like it and appreciate it, and that maybe it was going to be like, you know, like a hidden gem in my oeuvre, like oh, the handful of people who had read it would really relate to it. And so at first, when people started to bring it to signings, like when I was promoting the Atlas 6, which was also crazy enough in itself, and people would bring their copies of Alone with You in the Ether, and I would get really excited, like, oh, you have this, like, that's amazing. And then I started to see it a lot more, and I was like, it's okay, so people have this book. A lot of people have this book. And so I think that eventually when it came to the point where it was like, okay, this book has clearly gone viral, like, which is strange. It's just a strange situation, especially because, like, I think I saw one of the original TikToks that went viral, and it described it as like a book that Taylor Swift would write, which is like an interesting take. I'm not necessarily insulted, but like it is so personal to my experience that it was a little bit like, I'm not sure that's how I personally would market it. Like, that's not what I would tell people.
That's going on all of the niche reprints.
Yeah. I was like, I feel like you might be misrepresenting the content of the book to a lot of people. But cool. Okay. Yeah. And so initially when it kind of was on the table for like, okay, we could traditionally publish this. Like, what my agent was like, what do you want to do with this book? And it was like, well, it was my agent and my editor at Tor. They were both like, what's your plan here? Like, what do you want to do with this book? And I was like, you know, I do see it as like a pretty acceptable fit for Tor because it's got this like very speculative soul. Like, to me, there is, you know, for example, there's no time travel or magic in the book, but it also doesn't necessarily rule those things out. Like, just because they're not part of the daily lives of the characters doesn't mean that, like, you know, we could get to the end of the book and the next day Aldo discovers time travel and all of a sudden it's science fiction.
Is that a confirmation of what happens next?
Yes, that's what happens next. But yeah.
The end, part 2.
It turns out there's a time loop. Well, that's part of it. It's like, at the heart of the book, there could have been a time loop the whole time. That's just not part of the story. That's not the part of the story we're focused on. But yeah, so they were like, so thoughts on traditional publishing. And I think if I hadn't seen so many people bring me the book in person and like quite a few people when they've asked me to sign it have cried talking about what it meant to them, or saying that, like, you know, that book, one thing I'm really proud of is that, like, even though it's about a character who does not, she ends up not continuing her medication. She goes through, she uses like other therapy processes instead. There are lots of people who said that the book encouraged them to get diagnosed, which is great to me, because it is about accepting your mental health, not about issuing pills, you know?
Yeah, no.
So, so because I had those kind of reactions of people being like, this was like really relevant to my heart, that I was like, okay, well, some of TikTok might get confused about what kind of book it is. I mean, some people might think that it's a romance and be very, very disappointed by the fact that it's not what they're expecting. But the few people I think who really are going to find something from this book, they deserve to have access to it, which is a weird thing to say about like my art. That's like, you deserve to enjoy.
You are welcome. This. Here is my art.
You are welcome. But, you know, for me, I think it was something that I was only able to write after I had sort of crossed a bridge with myself. It was just kind of like, now that I have reconciled these feelings that I used to have about my brain, I'm able to tell this story. And so I think to come at it from that perspective is, you know, I think some people have said it helps them find peace. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for, because that's the place I was in when I wrote it. It was like a place.
If you didn't resonate when you were not in that place, it would have been a very different, more explosive book. I feel like everything would have been amped up, and you already amped things up to a here. So when you amp it up even more, it would have been like. Do you remember writing the book?
I do, and it was an especially noteworthy like inception for me, because I've always been trying to be a fantasy author. I have never like aimed for literary or romance. And I think that I was in the middle of writing something that I had planned to, you know, query as a manuscript. And then I just had this image of Aldo in my head, like the opening scene of him just like sitting in the park and smoking. And he was there. He was just sitting in my head for like a week. And I just remember it being very specific, the sense that like he was aware that I was watching him and didn't care. And like, I know there are lots of authors who say that characters just like appear in their head, but that doesn't really happen to me. For me, it's like a process of like, let's pull up something from my brain, not there's something already in there. And and so he was sitting there for like a week, and then I sat down with my therapist the next week, and I was like, there's this guy in my head. And she's like, why are you saying that like it's a bad thing? Like, what's going on?
Someone has caved their way into my head. And
I was like, well, I can just tell that he's not part of the project I'm currently working on. Like, he's in his own story, and I know that story is going to derail the one that I'm trying to, like, the one that's going to potentially get me a paycheck is apparently going to be put on hold for this guy that's smoking in my head. And and then like a few days later, Regan just like woke up, and I was like, she's in his story. They're in the same story. And I think from there, it was sort of like, it was very, in terms of creativity and chemistry, there was a lot of chemistry from the start that was like, okay, these are two people I really understand, because in some ways they're like two different parts of my brain. And I mean, I think I align myself a little bit more to Regan, because she and I are both bipolar, and she's also more of an extrovert than Aldo. Aldo is a little bit more imagined. But you know, those elements of OCD and anxiety and the
hyper focus.
Like those are there.
So on that note, where are we today?
Oh yeah. Man, I wish I had a good comparison. You know where we are. When I was a kid, in the first house I grew up in, I used to live in this Victorian house. And it was like out in the suburbs, and it was this weird house. It was my stepdad's house. My mom and I had moved in with him. And I remember we would like play in the backyard, and you would just dig up like artifacts from 200 years ago. And I just became convinced that,
which is rare considering you live in America. No, I'm joking.
It is rare. There's not like, you don't just dig up artifacts. Like I don't know if they were put there for me to find or what.
What were you finding?
I just like, you know, like little like ceramics and stuff. Like, Yeah, and I think in the house there was this old like Singer sewing machine. There was lots of like antiques around, and I became convinced that there was like a portal, like a secret portal in the house somewhere. And I just never found it. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, we're somewhere Victorian in a secret portal that I never found.
I would have got hours of fun out of that, just like hours, just running around. I remember I used to run around my like flat and then just make stories up and jump around. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Being ADHD."
Yeah, like, I'm growing my future in books.
Genuinely, I'm starting early. This is great.
I used to also think I was really into The Secret Garden at the time, which like I am aware must be even more problematic than I remember it being. But yeah, I was convinced also that like there was a side yard, and I was like, oh, The Secret Garden, it's there somewhere. I'm gonna walk through a portal.
So, we all tried, right? We all tried to like open doors and things and like knocking on like boards to see where we ended up.
Yes, yeah. It's funny, what were we all looking for?
I used to do spells. Yeah. Like I was convinced that if I said enough things the right way, that the bus I was waiting for would come as I summoned it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some of those are OCD thoughts.
Yes. What do you mean?
Oh, yeah. But no, I agree though. I think that, well, I think as kids we're all doing magic to the best of our ability, and then we discover that our abilities are limited.
Yeah. So you say that they kind of like just were in your head existing and popping up, and then just Regan just walked in, which makes a lot of sense for Regan. Did the process of writing this book specifically feel different to all the other sort of stuff where it was maybe more like had to be plotted out, had to be kind of thought about?
Yeah, I mean, every book feels a little bit different. I think that I'm writing to a different audience every time I sit down. Yeah. And like the Atlas 6, I think of as I was writing it for me, like I was the audience. I wanted to read a book like that. I wanted something that was like smart, but also very pulpy and like, you know, like something you would binge. Like that's what I wanted the Atlas 6 to feel like. And with Alone with You in the Ether, I really felt like I was telling the story back to the characters. I think there was something about like right from the beginning, Aldo could look me in the eye and Regan couldn't. And I think that as I was writing, and I was like, what truth are you not telling? And so in that sense, it was kind of also me, but in a different way. Yeah. And then like, you know, because My Mechanical Romance, then I was thinking about like, I guess the long story is I'm always writing to myself, but different versions of myself.
The metaverse.
The Atlas is for me right now. What do I want to read right now? My Mechanical Romance was me as a high school girl. Like what could have helped me? What did I wish I knew at the time? Alone with the Ether was like writing to myself from a few years before. So like a few steps back. Like if you just knew that all of this would be worth it, then maybe you could write this story. And
that's really interesting because always, especially Aldo, for me, comes across as very much like he doesn't notice people or things in the same way that we do. So if he's staring at you, that's really like hyper aware. He like gives you time to stop thinking about the bees and the hexagons and the time travel to think about you. You're lucky. Look at you.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I think it was just I was still in the thick of exploring the idea of unreliable narrators. And I think, you know, and not in a mechanized way, but in what ways do our narrators lie to themselves and to the audience? And that's part of why the book starts with the narrators, because I was thinking that at that point in the book, they wouldn't directly engage with the audience. They wouldn't tell the truth openly. So they needed a narrator to do it for them.
Which is a really interesting juxtaposition when you read it, especially if you read it on maybe like a Kindle, which is what I did initially, and you're going through and you're hearing these voices and it switches and you're like, is this like it's like Groundhog Day when someone's narrating your life, or The Truman Show when someone's watching you and actually looking at it and you're like, this is a bit, I'm like, hello, voices in my head. Like
Yeah, and I feel like Regan especially, she's performing for her narrator. Like she's aware of her
she
narrator.
Loves it.
Yeah. And she's like, you know, loving the fact that she is just a constant performance and everybody's waiting for what she's going to do next. And then, you know, for her, the bottom really falls out when she realizes that she doesn't know what she's going to do next.
Yeah, because she presents so much control, even when like she lies to herself about the control that she has for herself, and then actually it's just like you keep going so far. You're like, how do you stop? And it was this energy, and I was like, oh god, this is hitting the spots.
Yeah, there's lots of parts of her that are, you know, obviously I really relate to about kind of the way that two things can be true, that something about yourself can be true, like what you think you're doing, what you think is a performance for others is a performance for others, but it's also a performance for yourself at the same time. It's like it's a lie and a truth at the same time. I think that part of it is, you know, she really, in the beginning of the book, really believes that she is not lovable. And she kind of projects this, like, I'm okay with that. I understand that that's not the kind of life I'm going to have. And that was one of those, like, true lies. But, like, she does believe that. Has she really accepted that? I don't think so. So
yeah, because she very much existed as, she was like gravitational of her worlds. But everybody else could come in and come out quite thickly. And she was like, that was going to happen. I knew that was going to happen. So I like self-preserved.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why have I done this again and again? And like,
yeah, there's just, I think actually, one thing that I think is so important is just the idea of choice and what you choose to believe and how you choose to react to things. And one thing that, like, I still work with my therapist a lot on is, I have a tendency to be a cynic because I don't want to be surprised by bad things happening to me.
Yeah.
And I think it was like at one point she was like, okay, but if the bad thing does happen to you, like, will you really feel better for having been prepared? And the answer is no. And like, I think that's what's
right.
That's what's happening with Regan, is that, like, okay, she knows that people are going to leave her. And she acts like, okay, I know they're going to leave me, so it's fine. So I'll be ready when it happens. But then she isn't. And and that's something that's that moment where you look in the mirror and are like, whoops, this is not working. So hopefully the audience is also looking in the mirror in that moment. And
yes, we are
recognizing that it's a coping mechanism that doesn't work, that actually, I mean, ultimately this is a very hopeful book, that, like, ultimately it is worth putting yourself out there to be hurt by other people, because that is the only way you live.
And it's sometimes you need something, because like film and TV lie to us. That's just a given. Like, I've been so lied to. I grew up in that generation of like teen 2000 films that all lie to me. I watched She's the Man the other day because I just did some kind of like uplift, which is like, it was a terrible choice because it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, yay, this is a terrible film still, but yay. But like, it lied. It had a happy ending. And like what you do in this book is very much that they get into there is romance in there, but it doesn't solve the problems. The problems are still there, and it's in how you choose to relate to those problems, because it's honest, it's real, it's people's lives effectively.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the difference between a story and a life, is that, like, a story gets a planned ending and your life doesn't. And so you kind of have to do the living, like you can't wait for your ending, or you can't wait for like the feeling like you've reached a finish line, because as satisfying as that would be, it never happens. No. And so I kind of wanted that, like, we basically observed the first year of Aldo and Regan's relationship, and I didn't want to say, like, and here's, the definite thing that happens.
The epilogue 10 years later.
Yeah. And, and obviously my version of that is having Regan, like, run the scenarios in her head. And, so she runs, like, all the alternative endings, all the different ways they could end, the ways they could succeed and fail, and even fail as they're succeeding. Yeah. And I felt like that was very real and kind of,
it's human. We all do it.
And I think that it's not fair to assume that a love story is only a love story if it ends in marriage, or if it ends, like, it's not less a love story for being neat.
No, it's more honest. I think this is the thing people are getting from this, like you say, like, it's touched people quite strongly, and actually it's getting now to a wider audience, and actually you're getting a bigger range of perspectives that are all going, I feel this, I see this is actually, and it's actually a very special moment to have. Not to praise you too much, because I know how that gets.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm not listening.
As you sit in a library of yourselves, a museum to yourselves.
Yes.
Speaking of museums, Regan works in a museum, which I actually really love because I find art quite not inaccessible. Just I prefer to know art when you actually know the story of the art.
Yeah.
And it really, because otherwise I'm like, it's a lovely picture, cool.
Yeah. No, I think. Oh, sorry. Keep going with the question.
You go. No, there's not really a question. It's just fluid conversation.
Oh, okay. I was just so I took a lot of art history classes when I was in college just for the love of it. And one of like, I don't have a lot of regrets in my life because as bad as things have gone, they've obviously taken me somewhere meaningful. But I do regret that I didn't minor in art history or double major in it or something.
Really?
Just purely because I loved it.
Yeah.
I took this one class. I took this. So the reason I didn't, I came into college with like 1 year of AP classes. So I came in as a sophomore. And then I wanted to graduate early so I could get my master's early so I could go to law school early so that I could feel like a failure much earlier in life. But anyway, so I only had like maybe 4 extra, like whatever you want to do classes. And I filled all of them with art history. And I took this Baroque art history class with this professor who was like very, very awkward. I think he might have been the root of Aldo, actually, like so clear about his subject, but was really uncomfortable with the students, and like all the other students really, because they were art history majors. This was obviously not their most interesting class, but to me, I was sitting in the front row, just like ravenous, like I loved this class so much. I wrote a whole term paper on the significance of the staircase to social hierarchy in Baroque art.
Nice.
Well, because it was a whole thing about where, those like big, like, ceiling murals that are in like fancy houses. That
I have one here, yeah.
Yeah, so, classic, like your foyer.
Yeah, I'm looking at now, yeah.
And what you were looking at depended on what social class you were, because the lord of the house would either meet you, on even ground at the top or like whatever. So down at the bottom was always like hell, and then up at the top was God. Anyway, I wrote a whole paper on this.
Pick a direction, like. That's cute though. I love that.
And but one of the things I learned in one of my art history classes, it's not really a lesson, but the teacher said to look at each art piece for 30 seconds. And 30 seconds is actually a really long time. And but I make myself do it when I go to art museums. I stand in front of each piece for 30 seconds. And obviously you can't do this with children. You have to have a whole day to yourself.
What do you mean?
But yeah, I think when you stand in front of an art piece for that long, it changes right in front of you. You really see different things, like different things start to leap out at you.
Yeah.
I like to also, if you can go on a tour or have an audio guide or whatever, I think that is worth doing because you know more about the art. But even like, on days when I wanted things to be quiet, and I had an annual membership to the Art Institute, so it was a place I went very often. The armory, that was where I went for quiet. So, because it's logistically hard to reach. It's like in the back of there's only one way to reach it. You have to go through all this different art to get there. So there was never anyone in it. And I've heard people now who say that like they go on little Alone with You in the Ether pilgrimages. And and they're like, the armory was really hard to find. I'm like, yeah, it's perfect. It's amazing, isn't it? But yeah, so I would go there and just, look at the paintings for my 30 seconds. And it's just a really, and maybe it was good for me, like mental health wise. It's like, give your brain something to do that's also like peaceful.
Plus it helps you focus as well. Like you have to focus.
Yes. Like you have an assignment, you have to fulfill your 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And it changes like the purpose of being there. And I think that I wanted to accomplish that feeling in some ways that like, and Regan gives a couple of like lectures. I guess you get to.
They weren't lectures. They were like TED Talks.
Yeah. Thank you for coming to Regan's TED Talks.
That's how she was framing it, because she said like in the beginning, she's like, literally of this group, about 5 people actually want to be here. The rest of them dragged along, which is quite true on art tours, I feel like. So yeah, she wants to like share part of her world with herself and the wider audience.
Mm-hmm.
Did you pick like specific pieces to talk about?
Yes. Well, I think I wanted to use pieces that are actually, or at least at the time were actually in the Art Institute, which I think I think they all are. I know
we'll get them all
the Whistler, the sun going down over the English Channel. That one is in their permanent collection. The Armory is there. The Jackson Pollock, I think, might move around.
We'll get it back, don't worry. We'll do some organized tours and it's fine, don't worry.
Yeah.
Got you.
But what she says about Jackson Pollock is true of all of Jackson Pollock's work. That's like it's just the tactility and the Navajo undertones. It didn't have to be anything specific, but I definitely remembered that lesson in particular. So in the book, for anyone here who hasn't read it, in which case, sorry that I'm talking all about this book you've never read. There's Jackson Pollock, the way that he painted was it's based on Navajo sand art, so which is meant to be like what's the word? My brain is so full of holes. I'm trying to nightwing my child that's going so poorly. Yeah.
Sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's going so poorly. He doesn't want to leave my boobs alone. Okay.
He's a fighter.
Yeah. But so it's about the process of making art, because you know, with sand it can blow away at any moment. Yeah. And so by doing it with paint, what Jackson Pollock's doing is like kind of robbing of its soul, you know. So he's still
freezing it in like a specific like.
He's doing the process of creating the art is the same, but then by selling the art, like that's the it gives it a little bit of a
ick.
It's got capitalist ick to it, but like obviously he's an artist, he had to make money, I get it, but it's just that like it's not it doesn't honor what it's meant to honor, and that was something I thought would be interesting for Regan to discuss in the moment that she chooses to discuss it. And I liked also that I've been listening to the audiobook while I sign tip-in sheets for One for My Enemy.
Nice.
And Sarah Sue, the voice actress for Regan, is so good. Every now and then when she swears, it's so amazing. And she does it really well. Like I swear a lot in the book, so to me, like all the various uses of curse words are they just kind of blend, but she really leans in them, and it's good.
You feel it in that moment because it's not you just writing it. You're just like, oh, I read that.
It's really satisfying. But so in that moment, she says like, well, now that he knows she's a bitch, and it was just beautiful.
I love that you're listening to your own books. That's nice.
I know. Yeah, I know. Got my shrine here. For the record, these bookshelves exist to hold the excess of all the books that I have. Because, like, I have bookshelves in the house that have actual books that weren't written by me. And then I have these bookshelves in my office that are just here for me to...
Aesthetic. When I like first started doing meetings in lockdown and people were seeing my shelves, they were like, oh, that's really nice backdrop. I was like, backdrop? These are my shelves. And then someone went, is there a bottle of whiskey behind the fake book? And I was like, it's not a fake book. Like, I mean, the shelves are broken because they're just like really bad shelves, but that's okay. Just the weight of them. I'm having to use books to prop up the shelves, and it's a
that's
connected.
Beautiful.
It really is.
Yeah.
Although I was in here last week, it just fell down mid like when I was working. I was like, what's going on?
You need a raise, Stephen.
You try more best-selling books and I'll get a raise.
Will everyone please tip Stephen?
You can sponsor me on my LinkedIn.
Yeah, give us all your coffee link.
I don't even drink coffee. That's the worst part. Still.
Okay.
The judgment.
Just drop your Venmo.
The judgment that you gave me for not drinking coffee in that one look without even saying
No,
words.
I'm impressed with you. I am still nursing, so I can only have one cup of coffee. It's my fucking lifeblood. Like, if I didn't have my one cup of coffee, I'd be dead.
You go back to like 3 and 4.
I tried to just cut caffeine while I was pregnant because that's what you're supposed to do. But I get really bad migraines, and like, and also you can't take migraine medicine. So my doctor was like, you can do 1 cup of coffee, that's fine. Saved my brain.
So we go through the museums and the art, but it also, again, is still a heavy kind of scientific and kind of metaphysical aspect to the story with Aldo's quest, life mission, but like not even that. It's more than that. It's like a physical state of being to try and understand time travel.
Yes.
Because I was with you when I worked out about all these hexagons and the sixes everywhere, and you were just like, yeah. And I was like, no, they're just everywhere. And I kept seeing hexagons, and you were like, yes. And I was like, I don't understand. You don't understand what I was saying.
But, I do. I get it. Well, but see, I went through this like
exactly.
years ago. So I'm like, yeah, I know. But it's crazy. Once you start paying attention to hexagons and like the predominance of the number 6 in nature, it's everywhere.
Yeah. And then the bees, always the bees.
And then the bees. Yeah. I had a moment where I like forgot what the significance of the bees were. Like, because I wrote the book, and then I obviously couldn't touch it for a long time because it was just, it's very personal and like whatever. Yeah. So for a while I was like, why were the bees so important again? And now I'm listening to the audiobook and I'm like, oh yeah.
I keep getting TikTok videos about bees now. I think you've like triggered my like analytics.
Yeah, well, I'm not the only person to have like basically the same obsession with bees. I actually love that. Have you watched Wednesday, the new Netflix?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
When she went over to the bee, and I was like, oh, absolutely, she's gonna pick this. And then when he started going about like the anti-patriarchy that is the bees, I was like, yes. Because when I first discovered all of that, I was also very enthusiastic about it.
Did you do anything about that? Did you like commit and start like going to like hives and like get involved?
No. It's not that off brand. That it's something I would do. Like I started boxing because I wanted to be able to write fight scenes better.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a total sidebar, but so I wrote this article for Tor.com about boxing and how I use boxing as a way to inform my hand-to-hand combat scenes. And someone commented, they were like, I don't need to box, I can just imagine. And I was like, okay, great. And they were like, but like, okay, cool. And they were like, but the one thing I don't know is where do you look? Do you look at their feet? And I was like, no, don't look at their feet. If you're boxing with someone and you look at their feet, you're gonna get punched in the face. So anyway, so the answer to where do you look when you're fighting someone is their shoulders, okay? Guys, you got to look at their shoulders.
But you have to really force that. That goes back to like staring at paintings and people and things. Like I know when I'm convinced that I stare upwards and outwards when I'm performing, dancing, doing anything. But I know for a fact that I stare at the floor. Like I know, people look up and I'm like, I am looking up and I'm like, I'm not. I'm looking at the floor again. It's not easy just because you can do it.
No, well, I mean, I don't do it very well. I'm just saying that, like, if you, a writer, are imagining what to look for in your imaginary fictional combat scene, do not have the characters look at the other character's feet. They are going to get hit in the face. So,
it was a mood. People like not going to finish that sentence.
I just really wanted to give a small craft lecture here. But anyway, so I started boxing so that I could write better fight scenes. So you're not wrong that I could have started beekeeping.
Well, I just get a lot of videos about it. It's a fascinating like process. Like this woman in the video that I was watching yesterday honed a hive and some honey, and she was just scooping bees out. And like the rational part of my brain was like, that makes sense because bees aren't they're quite placid and they're happy to do that. But the other part of me was like, she's covered in bees.
Yeah, I'm not good with bees. I don't love bees. But I was very
That's how you get cancelled. That one sentence.
Yeah. It was more, So basically, when I was writing the book, I happened to stumble across the bee thing because I was looking up quantum groups. I was trying to develop, I had a very weak time travel theory that was not very scientific. And I was trying to, back end create the science. And so I kept running into quantum groups, and then I kept running into hexagons, and then I ran into bees. And I kind of accidentally did all this research on bees. I was like, well, now that I've learned all of this about bees, I'm going to write it into the book. But the bees are definitely a stand-in for the the fixation and the feeling like, I don't know. They treat the bees very existentially, because there are these two people who think that life is extremely predictable, and then this very unpredictable thing happens where they meet. And I think for me too, like when I talk about having written this for a past version of myself, I definitely mean that there was a version of me who was like, oh, this can only go badly. Like, I already know how the rest of my life is going to go, and it's going to be terrible. And like, I think when I was just starting law school, which is around the time I met my husband. Well, I met my husband in the first week of law school, but like me entering law school, I was like, I already know what's going to happen in my life. Okay. People don't really like me. I'm not going to be one of those people who gets married in their mid-20s. That's not going to happen to me. Like, I'm not going to find love that quickly. If I do, it's going to be something I find later in life when I've like fully developed as a person. Like when I'm like 40, and finally have my corner office and finally like slow down. someone who's already been divorced and like is going to find marriage to be advantageous, and like maybe then I'll get married, whatever. But like that's what I was expecting out of romance. Like, I just needed to find someone to bide my time with, until they inevitably got tired of me. And that's the thing I wanted to write for Aldo and Regan, is the idea that you can be like, life takes turns for the positive, which is very hard to remember when you're in this very cyclical sense of everything is the same, will always be the same, nothing will ever change, or if it does change, it's only for the worse. Life is gloom and then we die, which is true.
That's a very Wednesday perspective.
Yes, life is very hard, and at some point we will die. But
it is inevitable. That is one of the few fixed things. Well, at this point in time in life, it's one of the few fixed things.
Yeah.
If you want to correct myself from the future, do it now. No, okay, continue.
Yeah,
I have to check. Can you imagine? That would make this event like the best thing that's ever happened to any of us.
That would really make this event for sure. Future ideas for your TikTok channel. Anyway. But yeah, so I think it's also something that's very easy to forget while you're depressed, which is like the whole thing. It's just like you spend so much of your life, I think, well, I am talking about myself, of course, but I think it's true for a lot of people. You spend so much of your life being depressed about the stage of your life that you're currently in.
Mm-hmm. It's a trap. It's like a loop cycle. It's catch-22, effectively, but not quite. But
yeah. Like I was telling my husband when I think I started saying this by the time I was like 26. I was like, I used to be a prodigy and now I'm almost 30. And he was like, you're 26 years old, so.
No, but there's a very firm change when you get after 25, you're about 26, 27, being like, I basically just starting this over, and you can't go back to being 20, like 23, 24 when you were like in a prime, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And you're like, who am I? Why? My friend had a big crisis about turning 30, and we were like, calm down. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yes. No, I definitely cried the night before my 30th birthday. But now I'm like, being 30 is so much better. It's crazy. Being in your 30s is so much better. I do have a lot, like, things are starting to fail a lot more than I anticipated. My back hurts all the time.
That's what I was going to say. My back was broken at this point in life.
Right.
And it shouldn't, but...
At this point, I feel like I have a lot to say to my younger self, which is mostly like, calm down. I really think that I write so much about characters who are in their 20s and in their late 20s too, that it's just the hardest time, because everybody keeps telling you that it's the best time.
You're supposed to have made decisions based on your life to inform your life at like 18, 19, and then you go like, they're like, here's the world, go, and you're like,
well, I think that a lot of this I think that a lot of this is a flaw of YA fiction too, because like people discuss the coming of age story as if it happens in your teenage years, but coming of age happens several times. Like, I think when you're a teenager, you start to understand the best version of yourself. And then when you're in your 20s, you start to realize you are not going to be that best version. You are going to be a different, very good, but also much worse version of the self that you like idealized in your teen years. Because in your teen years, you're like, you know, anthropologically speaking, your job is to fit into the herd. And to be like everyone else so that you can find a mate and create more of you.
Yeah.
and you know, and then in your 20s, you realize like, oh shit, this is who I really am, and that person is not who I thought they were going to be. And then you also feel like you're running out of time because everyone has created this arbitrary line at 30, but like all of a sudden at 30, whoa, your value is gone.
I'm on the shelf, literally.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
I think that, like, you know, like many things, this is the men's fault, because I have met a lot of basically every woman and queer man has been very, very nervous about turning 30. And I find that straight men aren't that worried about it. And I think it's because of men. If you want the desire of men, then you're terrified of turning 30. If we could all just be loved by women,
genuinely,
it would feel so pressing.
Yeah. And we just reinforce all these like cultural things that everyone just like decides it's a thing, and we're like, but it's not a thing. You're trying to like constantly break down barriers, but you're like jackhammering against the wall that is so institutionally like reinforced.
Yeah, it's this whole idea that you're going to somehow start, it's like diminishing returns. Like once you turn 30, you've driven the car off the lot and it's only losing value every day.
Pimp my car. I want to reboot it now. I want to start again.
But anyway, it's not true. I like myself a lot more in my 30s than I ever did in my 20s. And I think that like I'm at a place where I think it's fair to expect that other people will accept me as I am. It's a very comfortable feeling, I think. It's a surprisingly comfortable feeling.
It's hard to accept it, but when you get there, it feels so good.
Yeah.
Like, because I turned 30 in lockdown, which was delightful. And so you kind of having to like make all these like, not changes, but like adaptations of being like, oh, I'm enjoying this. And then you have to go and actually put it into practice, which has been fun. But actually, you kind of just like stop letting things take hold as much as they used to, and then be like, it's just not a problem anymore. Like I haven't got the energy because my back can't physically take it to care about this problem anymore. Like to just
the decay is part of it. The physical decay is part of you letting go.
Yeah, it's literally Away With You into the Ether sequel.
Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy. Spiraling into deep depths there.
Yeah, anyway.
The bees, no.
Right, the bees. No,
always the bees.
My husband is 2 years older than me, and so he turned 31st, and he was like, I'm so young.
He has a very calm, fresh perspective on things. You're just talking to me, just like, yeah, and you're like, how are you this chill, sir?
Yeah.
Like, great.
Okay. Cool, because I'm spiraling. But then I crossed that line. I was like, oh, yeah, I am quite young. I do use an eye cream though.
I tried. I don't think it worked. I don't know. I think I'm not going to buy like a really expensive one, so I just bought the generic like store brand one that I was like, this will make sense. It's fine. I think the placebo works.
By the time you notice that you need an eye cream, it's probably too late for an eye cream, and now we're just doing it to like make ourselves
fill in the cracks.
But mine is from Soko Glam. Ooh. That's a good website.
Nice plug.
Hot tip.
This video is sponsored by.
Yeah.
But it is. I go to like friends' house and I see like lines and things and like products, and I'm like, should I be doing this? Like, am I just like, I did not get a memo somewhere, like a starter pack, like in Legally Blonde, but she's like, where's my like social calendar and like my like list of things?
Yeah.
And I just forget, like, no one give me that. What am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah. When was someone going to tell me? Like, shouldn't a doctor have told me when to start using eye cream? No.
Someone looked at you and went, you need it. You're like, oh my God. That's
But yeah, anyway, so aging is cool. I mean, aging is cool. It's a lot easier than
But it's good for perspective.
It sounds. Yeah, it really is.
So much.
Well, time. See, we brought it back around. Time.
There we go.
Is very good. Time traveling in retrospect is it's a very helpful way to accept yourself, I think.
Yeah. If you could jump into a metaverse of one of your metaverses, where would you go? Deep questions now. Or would you choose to not? Like, if you had a choice?
I mean, it's hard for me to think of any of my universes as very different from the one we're in. I think that's the problem. Is that, like, I am ultimately writing very grounded, very human stories. So even though I, like, inject magic into the world, there's still the same problems. Like, we still have climate change and colonialism and depression. And I think that, you know, and I hope that that's not a sign of not being imaginative enough.
I mean, I think you have a very strong, vivid imagination. Let's not go that way.
Thank you. But I'm just more interested in people, I think. Like, what is really interesting to me is like a human story, a person's story.
Yeah.
And and I also think that, I mean, from like a mental situation, mood disorder perspective, I feel like I have to spend so much time understanding me, understanding other people, understanding how I relate to other people. Like, it's a lot of work, actually. There's a quote in the book. Aldo says something about every day it's so much work to, like, get up and tell yourself to be nice and be a certain way and be social and all that work. I wanted to put it into words. I think I just wanted to have this. It's
emotional energy that you're constantly having to give off. Even if you're just like scrolling through your phone or doing anything, you're giving off an energy that you're not always getting back, which I learned that on TikTok last week. Go me. Actually, TikTok for that subject has actually been very, not helpful, but like really interesting for me to watch over the last couple of months, when you'll see things and going, oh, actually, that's actually me doing this or me doing that. And I'm like, yeah. And it's actually having conversations that we weren't having 5-10 years ago, openly and like in a beautiful way, and like in books, in TV, in film, like finally having conversations that people are almost scared to have.
Yeah.
Well, like, but thank
God. I think that's, what was I going to say? I completely lost. No, it might be gone now.
That was my bad.
I got caught up agreeing with you. I forgot what I was going to say.
Yes. Because you were talking about like Aldo, how he had a very sort of specific outlook on that. Whereas like Regan is always not the antithesis, but she talks about sliding doors moments and how every action from that single point was then affected in different ways. And I'm like, yeah. And then I'm like, I go back into my stuff and I was like, yeah, if I hadn't done that, then that would have happened. I could have done that. And it goes back to the choice and like the control of choices that we choose to not make or do make, which is fascinating.
Yeah. And I think that, working with the way that their minds worked was really interesting for me. And I just really wanted, I don't know, I think that ultimately there's no moment where it suddenly becomes healthy, you know? No. But I think that the significance of love or the shape of the love in the story that I'm telling was that feeling of like getting to put that burden down for a while. It's like you can rest. Like, I think that the best thing about love for me is the feeling like you can rest around the other person. It's like you no longer have to put up, you don't have to put in the effort, the very difficult burden of trying to figure out who you're supposed to be in that moment with the person that you love. You can just be, and not really worry about who that is. And so I think that for me, as I was writing it into this book, that moment is not an action, but a choice that, like, at some point they both, neatly, because it's fiction, they have the same moment where, Aldo's like outside and there's a stranger and he says, stranger, it's you and me alone in the ether. But that is the essential thesis of this book, that like, that your relationship to others is the only thing that's real. It's the only like thing that matters, really, because all the rest of life is, you know, pointless.
Getting deep on the pod.
Yeah, and just this idea that's when you choose to accept the love that's being given to you, and to decide, like, you know, it doesn't really matter if I'm broken or if I perceive myself to be broken. That doesn't mean that I'm not worth loving, that I'm incapable of love, that I don't deserve to be in love. I think there's just that moment when you accept that, like, okay, I love this person and that's what's important. And obviously it's not, that doesn't save anything. It doesn't fix or change anything, except that it does. It changes everything. Because it changes the way that you approach the relationship. It changes what you value and how safe you allow yourself to feel. And so I think that's what, so.
Well, you can't predict that moment. That moment comes like out of like, it's a curveball. You're like, oh damn, when you're already in the moment. It's like Regan walked herself into the situation and then had to like, not walk herself out of it, but like change her parameters of her understanding, which was doing a lot for that girl. Like she was very like, she's like a proper Capricorn. Like she was sturdy and resolute and like, and then was like, okay, let's try something new.
Yeah. I think that's just, you know, in observing other people's relationships and mine, it's so interesting how that the person who is that person is always someone who breaks a lot of rules for you. Like they break your rules. That's you have rules, and
then the chemicals react and they break.
The chemicals react. Perfect. Exactly.
I've been listening to it like on, not a repeat, but just on loop. When we talked about it, I was like, I haven't heard a song in ages, and I started blowing all of their songs. So it was that, Division, and No One that just in my head played. But at the same time, I'm like, all of these songs are very appropriate. I'm like, what is going on? How did Ali and AJ write an album of songs that then correlated into your book, Metally, 20 years later?
Yeah. How many books do you think I'm going to have to sell before I can get in touch with Ali and AJ? Just be like, hey.
Well, I met them like a couple of weeks ago. I tried to plug it, but then like they were going so quickly, I didn't want to like disturb them with like random like facts when I was talking to them. And I was just like, they just asked me how I spelled my name. And I was like, no, this isn't the conversation we need to have, but okay. This is I don't understand what's going on. I think we can definitely Jimmy rig that into a situation. Like we established at the London event, Taylor Swift has marketed your book specifically. Like she's made a plan there somehow. So I think if we can I make that happen, we can get you and Anna Daly together in a room somehow.
Yeah. It's fine. Cool. I was going to wear my Vanessa Carlton sweatshirt for you.
Oh, I love that sweatshirt. That was such a cool sweatshirt.
It's a really good one. And you know why I bought that shirt? I might have already told you this story, but anyway. So I was thinking about how much I love the album Harmonium by Vanessa Carlton.
Yeah.
And I realized that I wasn't sure that I had bought that album because when I was a teenager, that's when like, you know, streaming music was like a whole thing. And then I realized I was like, oh no, like I stole from Vanessa Carlton. So I was like, I have to buy some merch for her now. So I went to her website and I bought a crew neck.
Just everything you could buy.
As an apology for probably illegally streaming Harmonium. I'm so sorry.
The website at that time in our lives was rampant and rife. Like that was a beautiful.
Yeah. I don't think any of us, you know. I always think that my husband's always telling me that when like, you know, people illegally download my books and I'm like, why would they do that? He's like, remember Vanessa Carlton?
Wow, he's Vanessa shaming you. That's not cool.
He's Vanessa shaming me. And now I'm like,
no, I get it. I remember having that like switch on fear. I remember when they started to find people for doing it. I was like, and I had to then buy everything. I'm almost more extra. I have to prove I'm buying songs. And then I went through my old iTunes account recently and was like, that's not a nice list of songs. Like, it's not pretty.
At least you did it though. Good job.
I used to go to the library and like rent songs and then burn that, which is probably just as bad.
Well, I feel like I didn't understand the difference at the time between like just the internet and you know,
it was on the internet. It was available. That's why I took what was available.
It was just kind of like, well, what do you mean they're not being paid? Anyway,
they're basically not being paid now. You have to stream, like, because everyone's getting their Spotify Wrapped like, right at the moment. So somebody worked out that you have to stream about 126,000 hours of music, which is like 6 hours a day, to start even costing Spotify at that point. Yeah. So I was like, I'm not nowhere near this. I'm going to start listening to more music, like, but
yeah. So anyway, buy your album.
Buy your album, buy her merch. Join our Ali and AJ Cole and buy their merch and albums.
Mm-hmm.
I think
yeah.
and
Vanessa Carlton. Just pop on Harmonium right now for me. For all
personal requests. Listen to the book as you transition to the album, and then let us know how you feel.
On the note of Spotify, though, I do have a public Spotify, and Alone With You in the Ether has a playlist if you're one of those people.
How did you kind of go around putting that together? Was it like you just knew the songs, or you were like listening to things and you're going that?
I used to. So this was before I had my son, so like I had more time, and I used to listen to I used to listen to a lot more music, period, and like sort it into playlists, like depending on what vibe it was. And then I would listen to that playlist every time before I sat down to write. It was like, oh, I have to be in Alone With You in the Ether, headspace now. So let me play that playlist. But yeah, I usually wouldn't write to it. I get that thing where, if I'm listening to other people's words, then I start writing the wrong words.
Yeah. Many emails have been skewed.
Lots of like homophone mistakes. So yeah.
What's your favorite song on that track list?
Let me pull it up right now. I know that because people always ask. The song Peace by Taylor Swift is on there, which I know is about her fame. Yeah. But for me, when I heard it, it was about my brain. Like, would it be enough if I could never give you peace? Is a question that I ask myself a lot. That Aldo and Regan are asking themselves throughout this book. Constantly, it's like, is love enough? By Taylor Swift.
Yes.
The fundamental fear of like, I will never be the best person. Or just like I will always be difficult. I will always be hard to love. And so that was the feeling that sat with me, like in the pit of my stomach for the whole beginning of my relationship. That was just like, I really love this person who's a really good person, and I don't want to ruin his life. Like I'm only taking care of myself so that I don't wreck his entire life. So that I don't make him happy and therefore drive him away. And so it was really kind of like love from a place of fear, which is what I was really writing into this book. And then, when I talk about the significance of choice, it's that choice of being like, actually, I choose to believe that when he says he wants me here, he means it. And so that song definitely resonates. And then what else is on here? Oh, there's a lot of good stuff on here. Ruin My Life by Sarah Larson is a great one. The I want you to ruin my life is like absolutely the vibe. There's a lot on here that I don't even start. There's a lot of things that felt like they had that essential soul of like something about me is off.
Yeah.
That's and like something about me is broken, and I hope that's okay. Coming around to this feeling that like, but it's worth it. It's worth the trying. It's worth the risk.
It's weird how music does that more than anything else. Like you really connect with someone. You can really just be like, this is me on a page. I'm angst. I'm like shouting my angst. But like afterwards, I'm like, oh, I have next song. That's weird. And you just like move.
I've left this emotionally vulnerable state now. There's something I always feel really moved by, like certain chord progressions too. Like it's very easy to move me to tears, or almost tears. I always almost cry. Oh, we're bringing this conversation like full circle. I always almost cry at the Black Parade.
Really?
That like the do or die.
Yeah.
Like
and
that
building,
moment
like...
so triumphant that I always tear up.
Excellent. Alexa, play. I think that's the power. That's a testament to what like music can do, and then you can like distill that and put it into a book that people feel so connected to, because there is progression, there are levels, and there are like moments you're like edging towards. That's a powerful, beautiful thing that you have done.
And because musically you can feel satisfied. The like musical, a song has closure. So there's something very like, you can.
Your body goes through that journey to get to like
the full spectrum of emotion in 3 minutes ish.
Preferably 6.5, but it depends on the song line.
Yeah.
Because there's some things that go on for like 7 minutes, you're like, but it doesn't feel like 7 minutes. And you're just like, you were trapped in that moment, and you're so involved, and you're like, where am I?
Yeah.
I had to come out of that moment, and like, that's why I like living in like TV worlds. So I can go into a TV season and binge a series and live in that world, and then have to come out and be like, oh, I exist here now. That's what.
Yes. I think as a writer of fan fiction, there's no requirement that you leave.
So you want to like plug into a permanent state of just like Netflix.
Yeah.
That is your professional recommendations. What I do now.
Yes. Well, I mean, I'm watching Wednesday right now. And I'm having a great time. I love the world. It's very like it's got like elements of the Atlas 6, or it's got like it's a younger version of what I was the feeling of what I was trying to do kind of in terms of the world. And I feel like I've gotten away from writing romance. I read a lot of horror this year, a lot of like gothic. Nice. And so I think a lot of my ideas have not been romantically driven. And so being in this little like teen space, I'm like, oh yeah, romance is nice. Yeah, maybe I'll write some romance. So you
can write a big dance scene, and you can then choreograph the dance yourself and then put it in your book.
Yes. It's such a satisfying, like pretty much every teen series has that like dance episode, and it's so good. I love.
Oh, it was amazing.
Yeah. Oh god, what a good dance too. But so as a writer, I get to just keep living in these places if I want to. They just open up a different meditation period.
How do you distill your ideas into like, this is what I'm going to be working on now? You have to wait on the back burner. You have to just like wait a longer while. Which you're just like throwing ideas everywhere.
I mean, I think that I'm a Virgo rising. So I am very good at like prioritizing, and it used to be, before when I was like a no one and had no success whatsoever, it was very easy to be like, well, maybe this thing will be marketable, and maybe this thing should be my priority, and just kind of gambling on it. But now I have like assigned things to do. Like I have a contract that tells me what I have to write next.
A contract is fluid, technically.
Yeah, fluid enough. I actually think my contract is especially funny because I basically signed on for 3 standalone crossover sci-fi novels. That's technically what the Atlas 6 is. It's crossover sci-fi. And I find that so mystifying. Like, what does that mean? But I'm going to make it happen 3 times.
It means whatever you want it to mean.
Mm-hmm. I've been like, I can feel my next book like churning. I try to fight the like artistic impulse. Like I don't want to get here and tell you like, oh, I saw it in a dream, because even though that sometimes happens, it feels like it's like a crazy way to be a professional novelist, But I was in the shower the other day and I started to hear the narration of the next book. Like I started to write it and I was editing it, and then I was like, no, this is not. I can't do this right now. It's not what we're working on. So, yeah.
That's exciting though. So you've had a busy year this year. You've got a busy year next year. So the train is not stopping, basically, is what we're saying.
I mean, yeah, I'm hoping not. I definitely, in the terms of mental health, I do have a slightly unhealthy relationship to everything that's happening to me, and that I'm afraid that if I lose the just lucky to be here feeling, it'll all just slip away. So part of me, every time I want to like complain a little about how hard I have to work, I'm like, but would you rather not be working? So,
it's weird.
Like, yeah, this is the job. What's the Devil Wears Prada quote? The job that a million girls would die for.
To die for, but you've got.
Yeah. So like, I'm still willing to die for it. I don't deign to work here, but yeah, okay. So anyway, it will be nice. I think next year is going to be the last like super busy year where I have, because in 2024 I have 2 books coming out. So it's going to be The Atlas Complex in January, and then 12th Night, my next YA, which is actually, it's kind of She's the Man because it's based on 12th Night. That one is going to come out, I think, probably in the summer. So yeah, so nice. But after that, I think it'll probably be 1 book a year, which will be like crazy slow compared to 4 books this year.
The fans will riot.
Yeah, and it's going to coincide with my child being like older and in school. So then theoretically, I would have time, and I'm not going to have any idea what to do with it.
But you wrote so much before anyway. You were like writing a lot on your blogs. You had your like web series. Like you did so much anyway. I don't think you know how to stop. So you'll keep creating. It'll just form in different ways, which is quite exciting.
Yeah, I mean, all those like time travel things is like very much my jam. Yeah, I wonder where I came up with that. But yeah, it's like I like to have a story in my head all the time. Helps me focus. It genuinely does. It channels a lot for me. I think that creativity in general is very, very good for mental health. Like routine. Unfortunately, routine is so good for mental health. I hate it because it makes me feel so like unsexy as a person. I think when I first started like taking care of myself better, like there were stages to my mental health. It was first I was like, all right, fine, I'll go to therapy, but I'm not going to be that active in therapy. Like I don't really want to talk about the hard things. I just am going to be here, and then like I'll take my pills. And that was definitely that was the worst for me, because if you're just relying on brain chemistry, it's just not a great way to live, especially because of all the trial and error with the pills. It's like hard on your body. Yeah. Too. So like nothing's going right. And then I think when I started to actually, so then I started to be more creative and kind of channel my energy. And then after that, I decided like, okay, well, if I'm not gonna have pills, I still have to be responsible about my brain. Like I have to actively work on
to like the situation.
Like, I definitely use a lot of like, cognitive, what's it called? Cognitive behavioral therapy to kind of gain. Yeah, like let's just change the way that I think about things.
100%.
Yeah, that's been really helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, these like stages. So now, but when I was entering that period of my life where it's like, okay, I have to change the way I think. I have to change the way I take care of myself. I have to change what taking care of myself actually means. Yeah. I remember feeling very, very boring to the other people in my life who would be like, oh, hey, like, let's go hang out. And it's like, I can't really do spontaneous hangs anymore. Like I told myself I was going to like write a little bit and go to bed. Yeah. And like, I can't just like, I am no longer so fluid.
Yeah.
But that fluidity was very dangerous for me.
Because it literally, you can go any sort of, you can jump off the wagon at any sort of.
So being the kind of person that's like, no, I'm going to eat dinner at this time. It's going to be a good dinner. I'm going to make it. I'm going to cook it. It's going to be good for me. I'm going to drink water. I'm going to take a shower. I'm going to get enough sleep. So
well, look at you thriving.
So so I decided to take care of myself. And it does look very boring to the outside perspective because it means
it's important
I don't
to have that. Like, the structure of it has been so much like doing the dishes and then just like feeling like you've accomplished something, taking the win and being like, that's a win. Like,
having a clean workspace.
Oh no, I look at my bedroom indicates the state of my mental health, because I can say if I'm like not caring and it's a mess, and I clean it, I'm like, oh, this felt so good, and the rush is like worth it, so worth it. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's gonna be fun tomorrow job for me. This is I've started doing this so much more. At the end of every night, I'll like plan 3-4 things that I want to get done tomorrow, and then make sure I have that structure. So I'm like, this is what I'm doing. And then I do it. I'm like, I did the thing. And actually, that's really so beneficial more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. I live my whole life off a to-do list. Like I put everything on a to-do list and then I check it off, and it's fantastic. It's so good for producing serotonin. It's amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So the moral of the story is make lists, do good, write loads, and buy this book.
Yeah, if you want.
Go stream Vanessa Carlton and buy this book.
This book is definitely not for everyone. It's going to say very little to some people and very much to others. But if you're the kind of person who could benefit from this story, then I wish you luck. I wish you well.
I think it's going to touch more people than you think it does. I think you obviously curate in a very insular way for you, and just the kind of like the people that you knew were like of that sort of sphere. But actually, I think this is going to resonate in very many ways with different people. And I'm reading the reviews, and you don't have to online. So like, and I've been telling you that like people are very much like, I didn't expect this curveball to like come in and like make me think about things. And I'm like, yeah, I did, because I read it and I told everyone to read it. Like,
well, thank you. I'm happy.
What I'm here for.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. Amazing.
So next year you've got a great year. You've got One for My Enemy coming out, which is very exciting.
Yes, beautiful. The proofs are gorgeous.
Oh, the proofs, the precious is going out in the wild, and it's very exciting. It's a very hot property, which is very exciting. And then One for My Enemy comes later in the year. Masters of Death. So I'm just so focused on what's next. And then Masters of Death, and that's beautiful. That cover is stunning.
I love it. And I just finished copy edits on that one. And I did a lot of work on that book because it was my first one. It's much better now. Like, I always loved that story. I was always fond of it, but I'm a much better writer now. So elevating it was beneficial.
Excellent. And then do you have any last thoughts, feelings, things you want to get off your chest for the world?
No.
Excellent.
I'm
good.
It would be great if I just like revealed something there. But
oh yeah, there we go. Actually, I know how to finish. Tell me a lie.
Tell you a lie? Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I was about to be like, well, I brushed my teeth before this interview. I spent a lot of time on my hair.
You can tell.
Thank you. My husband is actually kind of when I met him, he's kind of a pathological liar. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because he's a middle child and like, I don't know. Mischief. But it took me a long time to figure out his tell, because he's a really good liar. He doesn't have any physical tells. The tell is that it's logically unsound. Like, whenever he tells a lie, it doesn't make any sense. If you just poke at it a few times, it falls apart. So yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. I might try and use that in the future. No, I'm not. I didn't say that. Thank you for that. And thank you for joining us. This has been fantastic, as always. I was really hoping this was our 6th chat, but I worked out and it's not. So I'm very annoyed. But we'll work it out some other way.
Yeah, damn.
Oh, God. I think London was our 6th.
We should have had a conversation yesterday, just so that this would be... Well, no, what is this?
I think London was our 6th event. So this is now the 7th.
Oh, so we've had too many.
You've had too many. And we just didn't realize. Now we're like perspectivizing and realizing. So we'll just start a new hexagon of new events.
That's true. We're just on a new hexagon. Okay, cool.
Until we hexagon again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please do go and buy Alone With You in the Ether. If you have already bought it, buy another copy, buy it for your friends, buy it for your family. This is the season of giving, and we want to give and keep giving this book to everyone. And